The second step is we want to identify the characteristics of a mature believer. So how do we do that? Does the Bible give us any help? Well, I think it does, and I think we can go back here, at least in my opinion, to Acts 2:41 through 47, and we look at what were values, and I would say not only are they values, but they're characteristics of a mature believer. They are also the functions of the church, but we're not talking about that right now. And notice it's interesting in Acts 2, in verse 41, it says, talking about the apostles, that they devoted themselves to these 5 things: worship, fellowship, BI, ministry, and evangelism. Now, what do I mean by those things? That's what the slide at the bottom of page 7 begins to define these things for you. So notice I've defined worship here: presenting ourselves as living sacrifices to the triune God. Fellowship, biblical instruction, learning and applying, that is, living out God's truth. Service, involved in authentic, fulfilling ministry that makes a difference. Evangelism, building redemptive relationships that result in genuine life-transforming conversions. So that's what I mean by those terms. Now remember, we said earlier that most people don't know what the characteristics of maturity are. I think these are characteristics of maturity, but I think that they could change, and it depends again on whom you're reading. I believe that this is more of a Lucan approach. In John, in his gospel, he mentions 3 things about a disciple. He says, first of all, they love one another. Let me see if I remember. One is spending time in the Word, loving one another, and fruit bearing. But I find, and then Paul, perhaps, the characteristics there might be the fruit of the Spirit. But I take a Lucan approach. And so basically I'm saying that the core values or the characteristics of maturity, again, are those 5 things. And what we're talking about when they're authentically in a person's life. So this is looking a little bit more at what people do, more so than what they might be. And I would say that a mature disciple authentically worships Christ. When they go into worship, they're not putting on a show here. They're not waving their hands saying, "Look how spiritual I am." But they authentically are honoring Christ during that time. And so the service is set up to help them do that, to facilitate that. Now, same thing with fellowship. All of this, they spend time with believers, with the one another passages, encouraging one another, those kinds of things. They make a point of doing that. Biblical instruction takes place. So all of those things you can see. And I would say if you add those together and look at the top of page 8, which is what I've tried to emphasize there, then the result is a person is somewhere along the way in that area called maturity.